Hello, my dear friends, and Happy New Year. Take a slow breath. Let your body relax as we gently step back in time. Tonight we are traveling to Japan, about 500 years ago during the quiet winter days of the late medieval period. This is a world without bright lights, without loud celebrations, and without rushing clocks. The new year here does not begin with noise. It begins with silence. Imagine you wake up in a small wooden home surrounded by thin paper walls and the soft sound of winter wind. Outside, the land is calm. Snow rests gently on rooftops and trees. The year has just changed, but nothing feels sudden. Time moves slowly here. The new year is not a single night. It is a long, peaceful season. In Japan 500 years ago, the new year was one of the most important moments of the entire year. People believed that the way the year began would shape everything that followed. Because of this, they treated these days with deep care. Loud behavior was avoided, anger was avoided, even hard work was reduced. The goal was balance, calm, and purity. Days before the new year arrived, families cleaned their homes carefully. This was not just physical cleaning, it was emotional cleaning too. Old dust, broken items, and unused tools were removed. People believed that bad luck lived in clutter. By clearing the space, they were making room for fresh energy to enter the home. As New Year's Day arrived, most people woke up early before sunrise. The air was cold but fresh. Fires were lit gently, not for celebration, but for warmth. Simple food was prepared. Nothing heavy, nothing wasteful. Rice, vegetables, and light soups were common. Eating slowly was important. Rushing was seen as disrespectful to the new year. Many families placed small decorations made of pine, bamboo, and straw near their homes. These were not for beauty alone. They were symbols. Pine meant long life. Bamboo meant strength and flexibility. Straw marked the boundary between the old year and the new one. These objects quietly welcomed good spirits and kept harmful ones away. Temples and shrines became important places during this time. People did not go in crowds like festivals. They went slowly, respectfully. Footsteps were soft. Voices were low. At shrines, people bowed, clapped gently, and prayed. They asked for health, peace, and enough food for the coming year. Big dreams were rare. Simple wishes mattered more. Children were taught to behave especially well during the new year. Crying too much, fighting, or breaking things was seen as a bad sign. Elders told stories quietly by the fire, stories of ancestors, stories of past winters. These stories connected the living with those who came before. At night, the world became even quieter. Lamps glowed softly. Families rested together. The cold air outside reminded everyone that nature was in control, not humans. Sleep came early. There was no pressure to stay awake. Rest itself was part of honoring the new year. As the first night of the year passed, nothing dramatic happened. And that was the point. The new year in old Japan was not about excitement. It was about steadiness, about beginning slowly, about letting life settle gently into its next cycle. As the night grows quiet, let this image stay with you. Cold air, soft light, slow breathing. After the first days of the new year had gently passed, life in Japan did not suddenly return to its normal rhythm. Instead, everything continued to move slowly, as if the year itself was waking up carefully. Imagine the cold winter air resting over villages and towns, thin smoke rising from homes as people stayed indoors. The excitement of the new year had softened into a calm routine. People woke later than usual, stretching the quiet mornings. There was no rush to return to heavy work. These days were meant for easing back into life, not forcing it. Families remained close together during this time. Homes felt fuller and warmer, not because of luxury, but because of presence. Elders sat near the hearth, telling gentle stories or simply watching the fire. Children moved quietly, taught not to disturb the peaceful mood of the season. Women continued light household tasks, cleaning carefully and slowly, making sure the home stayed pure and calm for the year ahead. Nothing was rushed. Every movement had a softness to it. Food during these days remained simple but thoughtful. Leftover New Year dishes were eaten slowly, never wasted. Rice was warmed again. Soups were gently reheated, and small portions were shared with care. Eating was not just about hunger. It was about balance and gratitude. People believed the way they treated food in these early days reflected how the year would treat them in return. Meals were quiet, often eaten together, with little conversation, allowing the body and mind to remain calm. Outside, streets stayed unusually quiet. Shops opened slowly or not at all. Farmers did not yet return fully to the fields. Craftsmen delayed their work. This pause was accepted by everyone. The new year was not a single day, but a season of transition. People believed jumping back into hard labor too quickly could disturb the harmony of the year. So time was allowed to stretch gently, like a slow breath. Religious thoughts still remained close during these days. Small daily prayers continued at home shrines. People quietly thanked the spirits for surviving the past year and asked for steady health in the coming months. There was no urgency in these prayers. They were calm and repetitive, meant to soothe the mind rather than demand results. The act of praying itself was considered enough. As night came, homes grew even quieter. Lamps were dimmed early. Families slept close together to keep warm. Outside, the world felt still, almost frozen in time. These nights were deep and silent, allowing rest to settle fully into the body. The new year was still unfolding slowly and carefully, one peaceful day at a time. As the night grows quiet, let us move gently to another part of life in old Japan, where the days continued to unfold with patience and calm. After the main New Year rituals had passed, life in Japan did not suddenly become busy again. The days that followed were still slow, calm, and gentle. Imagine a village resting under a pale winter sky. The cold air feels clean and still. Smoke rises slowly from small homes where fires burn quietly inside. These days were meant for rest, reflection, and careful living. People believed the way they behaved in these early days would shape the rest of the year, so everything was done with patience and care. Families stayed close to home during this time. Travel was avoided unless necessary. Farmers did not rush back to heavy work in the fields. Craftsmen worked only lightly, repairing tools or cleaning their spaces, rather than producing new goods. The idea was to let both the body and the spirit remain calm. Loud noises were avoided. Arguments were considered very bad luck. Even children were reminded to play quietly and respectfully during these days. Food during this period remained simple and symbolic. Leftover New Year foods were eaten slowly. Rice, vegetables, and preserved items were shared in small portions. Nothing was wasted. People believed wasting food during the New Year days could bring hardship later in the year. Meals were eaten slowly, often in silence or with very soft conversation. The act of eating itself was seen as a quiet ritual, a way to thank the spirits for survival through the winter. Visiting neighbors and relatives happened gradually, not all at once. When someone visited another home, they brought small gifts, often food or simple items made by hand. These visits were calm and short. Guests did not stay long. Long visits were considered tiring for both the host and the spirits believed to be present in the home. People bowed often, spoke softly, and showed great respect, even to those they saw every day. Children spent these days listening to stories from elders. Grandparents told quiet tales about past winters, hard years, and times when the village survived together. These stories were not meant to entertain loudly, but to teach patience and endurance. Sitting near the fire, listening to a slow voice became one of the most common New Year experiences for children during this time. Religion and spiritual care continued gently. Small offerings were still placed near household shrines. People cleaned these spaces every morning, wiping dust away and replacing old offerings with fresh ones. Prayer was not dramatic. It was simple, short, and personal. Many people prayed silently, believing loud prayer could disturb the peaceful balance of the New Year days. As nights fell during this period, villages became very quiet. With little activity outside, darkness arrived early. People went to sleep sooner than usual. Lamps were dim, fires were kept low. Sleep was seen as part of the New Year ritual, a way for the body to reset after the long year before. Dreams during these nights were often taken seriously. If someone had a calm dream, it was seen as a good sign for the year ahead. These quiet days slowly prepared people to return to normal life, not suddenly but gently. By resting the body, calming the mind, and respecting tradition, people believed they were building a stable foundation for the coming months. The new year was not just one day. It was a slow transition, a careful crossing from the old year into the new. As these peaceful days continued, life remained soft and unhurried, waiting patiently for the year to truly begin. As the New Year days continued in Japan 500 years ago, the rhythm of life remained slow and careful, especially in the countryside. Imagine small farming villages resting under a pale winter sky, with thin smoke rising gently from wooden homes. These days after the New Year were still considered special. People did not rush back into hard labor. The land was resting, and so were the people. Farmers walked slowly through their fields, checking the soil with calm eyes, knowing that deep winter was not the time for planting but for patience. The quiet of the season allowed families to stay close, sharing warmth and simple food while waiting for the earth to wake again. Inside homes, women focused on quiet daily tasks that felt almost ceremonial during this time. Cooking was done slowly, with care and respect. Leftover New Year foods were reheated gently over small fires. Rice, dried fish, and vegetables preserved from earlier months were shared again and again, not out of poverty alone, but tradition. Eating the same foods over several days was believed to keep the year steady and balanced. Children sat near elders, listening to old stories spoken in soft voices, stories about ancestors, spirits, and the turning of seasons. These moments passed time gently, without hurry. In towns and castle areas, the New Year calm continued in a different way. Samurai families followed strict routines during these days. Imagine narrow streets near a castle, swept clean, with banners moving slowly in the cold wind. Samurai men wore formal clothing when stepping outside, even if only for short walks. They visited shrines again, not for celebration now, but for quiet reflection. These visits were meant to remind them of discipline, loyalty, and the duties waiting later in the year. There was no loud talking, no laughter echoing through the streets. Everything felt controlled, calm, and respectful. Temples and shrines remained important centers during this time. Monks continued their daily prayers, ringing bells softly in the early morning and at dusk. Villagers passed by slowly, stopping for a moment to bow, clap quietly, and offer thanks for surviving another year. These actions were simple, but deeply meaningful. People believed that how calmly and respectfully they behaved in the first weeks of the year would shape their fortune for months to come. Loud behavior or careless words were avoided, as they were thought to invite imbalance. As days passed, small signs of normal life slowly returned. Shops opened for limited hours. Craftsmen checked their tools, but did not yet begin full work. Fishermen watched the water, waiting for better conditions. Nothing happened suddenly. Life eased forward gently like a slow breath. This gradual return was important. Rushing was seen as disrespectful to both the gods and the natural order. The new year was not just one day but a season of transition, where time itself felt softer and slower. At night, homes grew quiet early. Oil lamps were dimmed and families slept close together for warmth. Outside, the winter air carried distant sounds, a temple bell, the wind through bamboo, the soft step of someone walking home. These sounds were familiar and comforting. They reminded people that the world was still steady, still turning, still alive. The new year was not about excitement. It was about calm continuity, about beginning again without force. As these gentle days continued, people prepared themselves quietly for the long year ahead, knowing that work, hardship, and change would return soon enough. For now, they allowed themselves this rare pause, this slow and careful moment in time. As the New Year days continued to unfold in Japan 500 years ago, the rhythm of life remained slow and careful, as if time itself was walking softly across the land. Imagine the villages and towns still wrapped in winter calm, with thin smoke rising gently from wooden homes as families prepared simple meals. These were days when people avoided rushing. The New Year was not just a single celebration, but a season of calm living, meant to set the tone for the months ahead. People believed that how they behaved in these days would shape the luck, health, and harmony of the entire year. In many homes, the mornings began quietly. Families woke before sunrise not because of urgency, but because it felt natural to greet the day early. The cold air filled the rooms, and people moved slowly, wrapping themselves in layered clothing. There was little talking at first. Silence was respected. It allowed the mind to stay clear and the heart to remain steady. Elders often sat near the hearth, warming their hands, while younger family members prepared water, tea, or rice. Even these simple actions were done with care, because the new year was believed to listen closely to human behavior. Visits to shrines and temples still continued during these days, though not with excitement but with calm purpose. Imagine people walking along narrow paths, their footsteps soft on frozen ground. Bells at temples rang gently, not loudly, as if they were guiding thoughts rather than demanding attention. People offered prayers not only for wealth or success, but for quiet things. A peaceful household, a good harvest, fewer illnesses, strong family bonds. These wishes were spoken softly, sometimes only in the heart, because loud desires were believed to disturb harmony. Back in the villages, work did not fully resume. Farming tools remained stored away. Craft work was kept light. These days were meant for rest and reflection. People repaired small household items, cleaned storage spaces, or sorted grains from the previous year. Nothing was wasted. Even leftover New Year food was eaten carefully because throwing food away during this time was believed to invite hardship. Meals were simple but meaningful. Rice, vegetables, dried fish, and soups were shared slowly, often eaten together on the floor, with quiet conversation and long pauses. Children experienced these days differently. They were allowed to play but gently. Loud shouting or rough games were discouraged. Instead, children played with simple toys, wooden objects, or handmade items. Elders watched them with calm eyes, believing that children's behavior during the new year reflected the spirit of the household. Stories were told in the evenings, not dramatic tales, but gentle stories of ancestors, seasons, and lessons learned long ago. These stories were not meant to entertain quickly, but to settle the mind and pass wisdom quietly from one generation to the next. As the days moved forward, people slowly began to think about returning to normal life, but without sudden change. The transition was gentle. Like water warming slowly over a fire, life returned to its usual rhythm bit by bit. Markets reopened quietly. Craftsmen prepared their tools. Farmers checked their fields from a distance, not yet working, but observing. Observation was important. It taught patience. It reminded people that rushing brought imbalance. As night arrived during these New Year days, homes grew quiet early. Oil lamps flickered softly. Families sat together, sometimes saying nothing at all. Sleep came naturally, not forced. People believed that calm sleep during the new year invited calm dreams for the rest of the year. There was no pressure to celebrate loudly or stay awake late. Rest itself was a form of respect for time, for nature, and for the unseen forces believed to shape life. As the night grows quiet, let us leave this part of the new year behind gently, knowing that life in old Japan moved forward not with noise, but with patience, balance, and calm intention. As the quiet days of the new year continued, life in Japan slowly moved through a gentle rhythm that felt different from any other time of the year. Imagine the villages and towns still wrapped in winter silence, where mornings began later because the cold encouraged people to stay close to warmth. Smoke rose lazily from hearths, drifting into the pale sky, and the sound of footsteps on frosty ground felt softer than usual. Even after the main celebrations had passed, the feeling of the new year lingered like a calm echo. People did not rush back into hard labor. Instead, they moved carefully, respecting the belief that how one behaved at the beginning of the year could shape the months ahead. In many homes, families continued to eat simple, symbolic foods that were prepared during the New Year period. These meals were not about pleasure or fullness, but about meaning and balance. Rice remained central, served plainly, reminding everyone of stability and life itself. Small portions of preserved vegetables, beans, and dried foods were eaten slowly, often in silence or soft conversation. The act of eating together was more important than the taste. Each bite carried the idea of gratitude for survival through another winter and hope for health in the coming seasons. There was no hurry at the table. People believed that calm eating invited calm days ahead. Daily work during this time was lighter and more thoughtful. Farmers checked their tools rather than using them heavily, cleaning wooden handles, sharpening blades, and storing everything with care. Craftsmen opened their workshops only briefly, mostly to tidy spaces and prepare for future work. Heavy production was avoided when possible. This pause was not laziness, but respect for time. The new year was seen as a living moment that deserved stillness. Even merchants kept shorter hours, allowing streets to remain quieter than usual, with fewer voices and slower movement. Religion and quiet ritual continued to shape these days. Many people returned to local shrines or temples, not for grand ceremonies, but for personal moments of reflection. Imagine individuals standing quietly before a shrine gate, hands folded, breath visible in the cold air. They whispered simple wishes for health, good harvests, peaceful homes, and protection from illness. These were not dramatic prayers. They were calm, practical hopes spoken softly, as if not to disturb the spirits listening. Bells rang gently and the sound traveled slowly across the still air, adding to the sense of calm. Children experienced this period differently, with a soft freedom that felt rare. Schools and structured learning were paused. Instead, children stayed close to home, helping with small tasks or playing quietly nearby. Games were simple and slow, often involving handmade toys, paper games, or gentle outdoor play when the weather allowed. Laughter was softer, not because joy was missing, but because the season itself encouraged gentleness. Elders watched closely, offering stories about past New Years, sharing memories that connected generations through calm storytelling rather than instruction. Clothing during these days remained layered and practical. People wore thick robes and added extra layers to protect against the cold. Colors were usually muted, earth-toned, and calm, reflecting winter itself. Special garments worn on the first day of the new year were carefully folded away after use, saved for future important moments. There was pride in caring for clothing properly, as waste was seen as disrespectful to both labor and nature. Even this simple act of folding clothes became part of the quiet ritual of returning slowly to everyday life. As these New Year days moved forward, there was a shared understanding that rushing would break the balance. Life did not suddenly return to normal. Instead, normal life slowly grew back, like a plant emerging carefully from winter soil. People believed this gentle transition protected them from misfortune and kept harmony within the community. The new year was not just a day or two. It was a feeling that faded slowly, leaving behind calm minds and steady hearts. As the night grows quiet once more, imagine these villages settling into rest, lanterns dimming, conversations ending early, and the cold air growing still. Let this calm linger in your thoughts as the story pauses here, ready to continue gently in the next part. As the New Year days continued to unfold in Japan 500 years ago, life moved into a slower and deeper rhythm, one that felt almost suspended in time. The busiest ceremonies were now behind them, but the spirit of the new year still rested gently over villages, towns, and cities. Imagine narrow paths covered with thin frost in the early morning, wooden houses quiet, and smoke rising slowly from kitchen fires. People did not rush back into heavy labor. These days were still considered special, a time when the year itself was fragile and new, like something that needed careful handling. Farmers delayed hard field work, craftsmen worked lightly if at all, and families stayed close to home, believing that how they behaved in these first weeks would shape the months ahead. Inside homes, daily routines felt softer and more mindful. Meals were simple but intentional. Rice was prepared with care, often mixed with small preserved vegetables or beans saved from the previous harvest. Families ate slowly, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing quiet conversation. There was a belief that loud arguments, harsh words, or careless behavior during these days could invite bad fortune into the year. Because of this, people tried to remain calm, patient, and polite, even when space was tight and winter was cold. Children were reminded gently to behave well, and elders told small stories about past New Years, passing down memories instead of rules. Women played a central role during this part of the new year. They cleaned cooking tools, repaired clothing, and organized stored food, all while keeping the household calm and orderly. These actions were not rushed chores but symbolic acts. A clean pot meant clean nourishment for the year. Mended clothes suggested a year without waste or hardship. Even sweeping the floor was done carefully, as some believed sweeping too roughly could sweep away good luck. Everything was slow, deliberate, and full of meaning, even if it looked simple from the outside. Men, especially older ones, spent time checking household boundaries, fences, and roofs, not with heavy repairs but with gentle inspection. They walked the edges of their land, sometimes stopping to look at fields resting under winter soil. This was a quiet time of reflection. There was little talk of ambition or expansion. Instead, people thought about balance, survival, and harmony with nature. The year ahead was unknown, and humility felt safer than confidence. Many believed that respecting the natural order during the new year would bring protection later on. Religious feeling remained strong during these days, even without constant temple visits. Small prayers were whispered at home altars. Incense burned slowly, filling rooms with a faint, steady scent. People bowed briefly before starting the day or before eating, acknowledging unseen forces believed to be especially close during the new year. Spirits, ancestors, and gods were thought to be listening more closely now. Because of this, honesty and restraint mattered. Even private thoughts were meant to stay gentle. Social life during this time was quiet and limited. Visits to neighbors were short and respectful. Gifts, if exchanged, were modest: a little rice, dried fish, or handmade items. No one wanted to appear greedy or boastful. Showing restraint was a sign of wisdom. Long conversations were rare, but shared silence was comfortable. People understood each other without many words, united by the shared rhythm of the season and the meaning of the new year. As the days slowly moved forward, the feeling of protection and softness did not disappear suddenly. Instead, it faded gradually, like mist lifting from the ground. People began to prepare mentally for normal life, but without urgency. The new year was not just a single day or celebration. It was a stretch of time meant to gently guide the heart and mind into the months ahead. Everything about this period taught patience, awareness, and respect for small moments. In this way, the new year 500 years ago in Japan was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, careful, and deeply rooted in everyday life. It lived in how people walked, how they spoke, how they ate, and how they waited. As the cold air lingered and the days slowly lengthened, life did not rush forward. It breathed slowly, allowing the year to settle in naturally. As the New Year days continued in Japan 500 years ago, daily life slowly unfolded in a careful and respectful way, without sudden change or noise. Imagine the winter mornings growing a little brighter each day, while the cold air still rested gently over villages, towns, and farming fields. People did not rush back into heavy work. Instead, they moved slowly, believing that the way the year began would shape how the rest of it would feel. A calm start was thought to bring a calm future. Homes remained quieter than usual, and families stayed close together, sharing warmth, food, and silence. In farming villages, tools were still mostly set aside during these days. Farmers believed that overworking too soon could offend the spirits of the land. Fields lay quiet under frost, and paths between homes were marked by soft footsteps rather than busy movement. People spent time repairing small household items, mending clothing, and preparing simple meals from stored rice, beans, and dried vegetables. These tasks were done slowly and mindfully, without stress. Even simple work was treated with care, as if each action carried meaning into the year ahead. In towns and castle cities, shops did not fully open right away. Merchants cleaned their storefronts, wiped shelves, and carefully arranged goods, but business remained light. Customers moved gently through streets, greeting one another with polite bows and soft words. There was a shared understanding that these days were not meant for profit or ambition. They were meant for balance. The sound of wooden sandals on stone roads mixed with distant temple bells, creating a steady and calming rhythm that filled the air. Food during this period remained simple and symbolic. Families continued to eat New Year dishes made to last several days, such as rice cakes, preserved fish, and sweet beans. These foods were chosen not just for nourishment, but for what they represented. Long noodles symbolized long life. Sweet flavors symbolized happiness. Nothing was wasted, and meals were eaten slowly, often in silence. Eating together was as important as the food itself, reinforcing family bonds and shared purpose. Children during these days were encouraged to behave gently and respectfully. Loud games were discouraged inside the home. Instead, children listened to elders, helped with small tasks, and learned stories about ancestors and local traditions. These quiet lessons were believed to shape their character for the year ahead. Elders spoke calmly, sharing memories and advice, reminding the younger generation of their place within the family and the larger community. Religion and quiet reflection remained present, even after the main New Year rituals had passed. People continued to offer small prayers at home altars, lighting incense and bowing quietly. Some returned to shrines or temples for brief visits, not for celebration but for reassurance. They asked for steady health, good harvests, and peace within the household. These prayers were not spoken loudly. They were whispered or simply felt, carried by stillness rather than words. As the evenings arrived, lamps were lit early, and families gathered close as darkness fell. Stories were shared softly, sometimes repeating the same tales heard many times before. There was comfort in familiarity. Outside, the winter night wrapped the land in silence, broken only by wind or distant footsteps. Inside, warmth, routine, and calm filled the space. These evenings were not meant to entertain, but to settle the mind and body. As these gentle days passed, Life did not suddenly return to its usual pace. Instead, it eased forward slowly, like water flowing back into a quiet stream. People believed that rushing too quickly would break the harmony created at the start of the year. By moving slowly, speaking softly, and living simply, they hoped to carry this calm into the months ahead. As the New Year days moved gently forward in Japan 500 years ago, the feeling of time itself seemed to slow down. These were not rushed days. Life did not suddenly return to work or loud activity. Instead, the quiet of the new year stretched softly, like a long winter morning. Imagine villages where smoke rose slowly from rooftops, not in a hurry, just enough to warm small rooms where families sat close together. The cold air remained, but it felt calmer now, almost friendly. People believed these days were still special, still touched by the spirits of the new year, and so they moved carefully, respectfully, and slowly. During this time, many people stayed close to home. Farmers did not rush back to the fields. Craftsmen did not open their workshops fully. Even samurai who lived by duty allowed themselves a gentler pace. This pause was important. It was believed that how you behaved in the first days of the year shaped the months ahead. Loud anger, rushed movement, or careless words were avoided. Calm actions were seen as a way to invite calm fortune. Silence was not empty. It was meaningful. Inside homes, daily life felt simple and steady. Meals remained plain but warm. Rice, vegetables, and small leftovers from New Year dishes were eaten slowly. Eating was not about hunger alone. It was about gratitude. Each bite was taken with care, as food was precious in winter. Families sat together on the floor, wrapped in layers of clothing, sharing the same warmth. Conversation was soft. Stories were not dramatic. People spoke about the past year gently, without complaint, and about the coming year with quiet hope. Children were still allowed small joys. They played simple games indoors or near the home, careful not to disturb the calm. Wooden toys, paper games, and quiet laughter filled the air. Elders watched them with relaxed eyes, believing that a peaceful child brought peaceful fortune. There was no loud celebration now. The excitement had passed. What remained was a deep, steady comfort. Religion and belief stayed close during these days. Even after the main New Year rituals were done, people continued small daily prayers. Some whispered wishes while warming their hands by the fire. Others quietly thanked the spirits for surviving another winter so far. There was a strong feeling that unseen forces were still nearby, still listening. Because of this, people kept their homes clean, their words kind, and their actions gentle. As night came, evenings felt longer. Lamps burned softly. Shadows moved slowly across paper walls. People went to sleep earlier than usual, resting their bodies and minds. Sleep during this time was seen as healing. Dreams were thought to carry messages or feelings for the year ahead. Because of this, people tried to fall asleep calmly, without worry, letting their thoughts drift like snow settling on the ground. These days after New Year were not empty or boring to those who lived them. They were full of meaning even in stillness. Life did not rush forward. It breathed. It paused. It allowed people to feel time passing without fear. In this gentle space between celebration and routine, people found a quiet strength. As the cold night settles again in your imagination, let this slow rhythm continue. The village rests. The homes are warm. The year has begun, not with noise, but with calm endurance and quiet hope. As the New Year period slowly reached its later days, life in Japan 500 years ago continued to move at a calm and measured pace, never rushing, never breaking the quiet rhythm that winter naturally created. Even after the most formal celebrations had passed, people did not suddenly return to loud work or busy schedules. Instead, the days after New Year were treated as a gentle extension of the holiday itself. Imagine villages resting under pale winter sunlight, thin smoke rising lazily from hearths, and the sound of wooden doors opening softly in the morning air. People woke later than usual, allowing the body to follow the slow rhythm of the season. There was a shared understanding that these days were meant for easing back into life, not forcing it. Families continued to eat simple but meaningful meals together. Leftover New Year foods were still shared, carefully preserved and eaten slowly, never wasted. Rice was portioned with care, soups were reheated gently, and pickled vegetables remained an important part of each meal. Eating together was not rushed. People sat close to the warmth of the fire, listening to quiet conversation or long pauses filled only by the sound of breathing and crackling wood. These meals were less about celebration and more about comfort, helping the body stay warm and the mind stay calm during the coldest part of the year. During these later New Year days, visiting nearby relatives or neighbors was still common, but it happened quietly and respectfully. There was no loud laughter or large gatherings. Instead, visits were short and meaningful. A person might walk along a narrow path between rice fields now resting under frost, carrying a small bundle of food or a simple gift. When they arrived, greetings were soft, bows were deep, and words were chosen carefully. These visits reinforced social bonds without disturbing the peaceful mood of the season. Even children were expected to behave calmly, learning from an early age that winter was a time for restraint and reflection. Work slowly began to return, but only in its lightest form. Farmers checked tools, repaired small items, and planned quietly for the coming year rather than performing heavy labor. Craftsmen cleaned their workspaces, sharpened blades, or sorted materials without urgency. There was no pressure to produce immediately. The belief was that starting the year with calm actions would shape the months ahead. If the beginning was rushed or chaotic, the rest of the year might follow the same path. This belief encouraged patience and mindfulness in every small task. Religious reflection also continued during this time. Some people returned to local shrines or temples not to celebrate, but to sit quietly, offer thanks, and think about the year ahead. There were no crowds now, only a few individuals standing in silence, feeling the cold air on their skin and the smooth wood beneath their hands. These moments were deeply personal. Prayers were not spoken loudly. They were held quietly inside, carried by breath rather than voice. As night fell on these later New Year days, evenings became especially quiet. Lamps glowed softly, casting long shadows on wooden walls. People wrapped themselves in layered clothing and settled into stillness. Stories were sometimes shared, but often silence was preferred. Sleep came early, guided by darkness and fatigue rather than by clocks. The body rested deeply, supported by the sense that nothing urgent was waiting for the next day. These final days of the New Year period did not end with a clear line or sudden change. Instead, they faded gently into ordinary life, the way winter fades into spring without announcement. This slow transition was intentional. It allowed people to carry the calm of the new year forward, letting it influence their thoughts, their work, and their relationships long after the celebrations themselves were over. As the New Year days moved deeper into the cold season, life in Japan 500 years ago slowly began to shift again, but it did so gently, without any sudden change. Imagine the villages and towns still wrapped in winter quiet, where snow rested on rooftops and the ground felt firm beneath wooden sandals. People did not rush back into heavy work. The New Year period was believed to carry a special kind of energy, and moving too fast was thought to disturb the calm spirit of the year. Each morning began with simple routines. Fires were lit slowly, rice was warmed, tea was poured carefully. The air felt clean and still, and even the smallest sound seemed clearer than usual. Families continued to spend time together during these days. Elders shared quiet stories about past years, speaking softly so children would listen closely. These stories were not loud or exciting. They were slow memories of harvests, weather, and small lessons about patience and respect. Children sat near the fire, warming their hands, learning simply by listening. This passing of memory was an important part of the new year. It helped connect the past to the future, reminding everyone that life moved forward one year at a time, just like the steady change of seasons. In towns, shopkeepers slowly reopened their wooden doors. They swept the ground in front of their shops with care, not just to clean, but as a symbolic act. Sweeping was believed to clear away bad luck left behind from the old year. Goods were placed neatly. Nothing was rushed. Customers moved quietly, speaking politely, wishing each other well for the year ahead. Even business felt calmer during this time, guided more by respect than urgency. Temples and shrines continued to play a central role in these days. People returned again, sometimes alone, sometimes with family, to offer simple prayers. They thanked the spirits for protection and asked for steady health rather than wealth or power. Bells rang softly in the cold air. The sound carried slowly across the land, reminding everyone that the new year was still unfolding. These visits were not dramatic. They were calm moments of reflection, where people stood still, breathed deeply, and allowed their thoughts to settle. At home, meals remained simple. Heavy foods were avoided. Light soups, rice, and preserved vegetables were common. The belief was that gentle food helped the body ease into the year without strain. Eating slowly was encouraged. Silence during meals was normal, not uncomfortable. It allowed people to focus on taste, warmth, and gratitude. Food was not just nourishment. It was a quiet ritual that matched the peaceful rhythm of the season. Work slowly returned, but it did so in stages. Farmers checked tools, repaired small items, and walked their fields to observe the land. They did not begin planting yet. Instead, they watched and waited. Observation was considered wise. The land, like people, needed time to wake fully from winter. Craftsmen inspected their workshops, cleaned their spaces, and prepared materials. Preparation mattered more than action during these days. As evening arrived, homes filled with soft light again. Lamps flickered gently. People sat close together, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply sharing silence. The new year was still considered young, and these quiet evenings helped protect its fragile beginning. Sleep came early. Rest was respected. The belief was simple. A calm beginning created a calm year. In this way, the new year in Japan 500 years ago continued not with excitement, but with patience. Each day added another layer of quiet meaning. Life did not rush forward. It unfolded slowly, like a story told one soft sentence at a time. As the New Year season slowly continued in Japan 500 years ago, the days remained gentle and unhurried, shaped by a deep sense of calm that felt different from ordinary time. After the main celebrations had passed, people did not rush back into heavy work or loud activity. Instead, the rhythm of life stayed soft, as if the year itself needed time to wake up. Villages rested under winter skies, with pale sunlight touching rooftops, fields, and narrow paths. The cold air carried quiet sounds, footsteps on packed earth, the soft creak of wooden doors, and the distant call of birds. These were days meant for reflection, not effort. Inside homes, families continued small New Year habits that helped ease the mind into the year ahead. Simple meals were prepared slowly, using what remained from the festival foods. Rice was warmed carefully, soups were kept light, and vegetables were shared with patience. Eating was not rushed. People sat close together, often in silence, letting warmth return to their bodies. Conversation, when it happened, was calm and thoughtful. Elders spoke gently about past years, offering quiet advice while younger family members listened respectfully. These moments helped create a sense of continuity, linking the past year to the one just beginning. Temples and shrines still played an important role during these later New Year days. Many people returned again, not for celebration, but for quiet prayer. The paths leading to shrines were less crowded now, making the experience slower and more personal. Visitors bowed softly, offered small coins, and stood still for a few moments longer than usual. The sound of wind through trees, the faint ring of bells, and the smell of incense created a peaceful space where people could let go of worries carried from the old year. These visits were not dramatic or emotional. They were steady and grounding, helping people feel settled. Work during this time remained light. Farmers avoided heavy labor, allowing the soil to rest during winter. Craftsmen returned to their tools slowly, repairing rather than producing, sharpening blades, fixing handles, and cleaning workspaces. This gentle return to work helped the body adjust after days of rest. There was an understanding that pushing too hard too soon could disturb the balance of the year. Life moved forward, but carefully, step by step. Clothing during these days stayed layered and practical. Winter robes were worn with care, often mended during the quiet hours indoors. Women and men alike spent time repairing garments, sewing by low light, hands moving slowly and steadily. These small acts of care reflected a broader attitude toward life at this time. Nothing was wasted, nothing was rushed, and nothing needed to be perfect. The focus was on balance and patience. Children experienced this part of the new year differently. With fewer formal activities, they played quietly near homes, drawing shapes in the dirt, following each other through narrow paths, or listening to stories told by elders. Their laughter was soft, not loud, matching the mood of the season. Even play felt calm, guided by the example of adults around them. As the days continued, people slowly began to think about the months ahead. This was not done with anxiety, but with quiet preparation. Tools were checked, seeds were counted, plans were considered without urgency. The new year was not something to conquer, but something to walk into gently. This attitude helped people face uncertainty with steadiness rather than fear. In this way, the later days of the New Year season in Japan 500 years ago were not an ending, but a soft bridge between celebration and daily life. They allowed the spirit to settle, the body to rest, and the mind to feel ready for what would come next. Nothing dramatic happened, and that was exactly the point. Life continued, calm and unbroken, carried forward by small, careful moments. As the later days of the new year quietly unfolded in Japan 500 years ago, a gentle sense of balance slowly returned to everyday life. The special stillness of the holiday did not end suddenly. Instead, it softened little by little, like snow melting under pale winter sunlight. Villages and towns remained calm, but the rhythm of work and responsibility began to gently reappear. Imagine narrow paths where footprints from the New Year celebrations were slowly covered by fresh snow, and wooden houses where doors opened a little wider each morning as people stepped back into their routines with care and patience. In farming villages, the fields rested beneath winter frost, and there was no rush to work the land. Instead, people spent these days repairing tools, mending clothing, and preparing quietly for the coming seasons. Families gathered indoors, sitting close to the hearth, sharing simple meals made from stored rice, dried vegetables, and preserved foods prepared before winter began. These meals were not festive like the first days of the new year, but they were warm and steady, offering comfort rather than excitement. Eating together in silence was common, with conversation kept soft and respectful, as if the New Year's spirit still lingered in the air. In towns and cities, small shops began to open again, though business moved slowly. Merchants greeted one another with polite bows, offering delayed New Year wishes to those they had not yet seen. There was no loud bargaining or hurried movement. Everything felt unspokenly gentle, as though people believed rushing too soon might disturb the calm fortune of the year ahead. Craftsmen returned to their workshops, carefully handling wood, paper, and metal, easing themselves back into labor after days of rest and reflection. Temples and shrines continued to receive visitors, even after the main celebrations had passed. People came not in crowds but alone or in small groups, walking quietly along stone paths. They offered final prayers for health, stability, and protection through the long year ahead. The sound of wind through trees and the faint ringing of bells created an atmosphere of deep calm. These visits were not about ceremony anymore, but about reassurance, a quiet way to carry the New Year's hopes forward. Inside homes, women focused on restoring order after the celebrations. Decorations were slowly removed, cleaned, and stored away for the next year. Floors were swept, mats were aired, and everyday objects were returned to their usual places. This careful return to normal life was considered important because order in the home was believed to reflect order in the coming months. Children, who had enjoyed freedom during the holiday, were gently guided back into lessons and responsibilities, learning again the value of discipline and patience. As nights fell during this period, they remained long and quiet. Oil lamps glowed softly behind paper screens, and families prepared for sleep earlier than usual, conserving energy during the cold season. There was a shared understanding that the new year was not only a single moment but a slow transition, a bridge between reflection and responsibility. Life did not rush forward. It settled calmly, carrying the hope of the year ahead into each simple task. In this way, the New Year in Japan 500 years ago did not end with noise or final celebration. It faded gently into daily life, leaving behind a sense of calm purpose. The people believed that how they moved through these quiet days would shape the tone of the entire year. And so they walked slowly, spoke softly, and lived carefully, allowing the New Year's spirit to rest quietly within them as life continued. As the New Year days slowly moved forward, life in Japan did not suddenly change back to ordinary routines. The feeling of the New Year lingered softly in the air, like cold mist resting over fields and rooftops. Imagine waking up in a small wooden home as pale winter light enters through paper screens. The house is quiet. The sounds of celebration have faded, but the calm that followed feels just as important. These days were not empty. They were gentle days meant for settling the heart, allowing the year to begin without rush. People began returning to their daily work slowly and carefully. Farmers stepped back into their fields, checking winter crops and tools, moving at an unhurried pace. Craftsmen reopened workshops, lighting small fires to warm their hands before working. There was no sense of urgency. The new year taught patience first. Elders reminded the young that how one begins the year matters, and starting slowly was believed to bring balance and steady fortune. Each task was done with care, as if the year itself was listening. In many villages, families continued small New Year rituals even after the main celebrations ended. Leftover rice cakes were gently toasted and shared. These meals were quiet and simple, eaten close to the hearth. Conversation was soft. Laughter was gentle. It was believed that loud voices or careless words could disturb the peace of the early year. The home during this time felt like a shelter, protecting everyone inside from harsh winter and from bad luck alike. Temples and shrines remained important places during these days. People continued to visit, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs, offering short prayers before returning home. The paths to these places were worn smooth by many footsteps. Bells rang softly in the cold air. Incense smoke drifted upward, thin and slow. These visits were not rushed. People stood quietly, letting thoughts settle, asking not for wealth or power, but for health, calm days, and harmony within the family. Children returned to simple play after days of special treatment. They practiced writing the first characters of the year, carefully brushing ink onto paper. Mistakes were accepted. Elders said the first writing did not need to be perfect, only sincere. This practice reflected how people viewed the year ahead. It did not need to be flawless. It only needed honest effort and steady care. As nights came earlier and colder, families gathered indoors again. Oil lamps flickered softly. Stories were told, not dramatic ones, but quiet memories of past years, of ancestors, of lessons learned slowly over time. These stories connected the present to the past, reminding everyone that they were part of a long, unbroken rhythm. The new year was not just a single day. It was a gentle doorway, opening slowly. By the end of these days, life felt ready to continue. Not hurried, not forced, simply ready. The new year had settled into the bones of daily life, leaving behind calm, intention, and quiet hope. People slept peacefully, believing the year had begun properly, with respect, patience, and care. As the New Year period slowly reached its later days, life in Japan about 500 years ago entered a calm and steady rhythm that felt different from ordinary time. The excitement of the first sunrise had faded, the visits to shrines had become fewer, and the special foods were now eaten more slowly, stretched across many days so nothing was wasted. Imagine quiet village homes where winter light comes softly through paper windows, and families sit close together to keep warm. The new year was not rushed. There was no sudden return to hard work. Instead, these days were meant for gentle living, reflection, and balance. People believed that how they behaved during these days would shape the entire year ahead, so everything was done with care and patience. During this period, many households focused on maintaining harmony inside the home. Arguments were avoided as much as possible. Harsh words were believed to invite bad luck. Even small actions like sweeping floors or arranging sleeping mats were done mindfully. Cleaning continued, but not in a hurried way. It was about keeping the home pure and calm rather than perfectly clean. Imagine a mother quietly folding cloth, a father repairing a small tool by the fire, and children sitting nearby listening to old stories. These stories often spoke about ancestors, seasonal spirits, and lessons about kindness and restraint. The new year was a time when the past felt close and present, gently guiding daily life. Food during these later New Year days was simple but meaningful. Rice, vegetables preserved from autumn, and leftover New Year dishes were shared slowly. Nothing was wasted. Eating together was more important than eating much. Each meal was quiet and unhurried, with gratitude expressed not loudly but through calm behavior. People believed that overeating or acting greedy during this time could bring imbalance to the year. So portions stayed small, and meals ended before anyone felt too full. Warm tea helped the body during cold evenings, and the steam rising from cups added to the peaceful feeling inside homes. Outside, villages felt almost paused in time. Fields rested under winter frost. Paths were quiet, with fewer travelers than usual. When people met, greetings were polite and gentle. Voices stayed low. The new year was not only a celebration but also a sacred pause, a space between what had passed and what was yet to come. Craftsmen did not fully return to work. Farmers did not rush back to fields. Instead, people checked tools, repaired clothing, and prepared slowly for the months ahead. This preparation was calm and thoughtful, not stressful. Spiritual life remained important during these days. Some people returned quietly to local shrines, not for celebration, but for silent thanks. They might stand briefly, hands together, breathing slowly in the cold air. There was no need to ask loudly for things. Gratitude was considered more powerful than requests. The belief was that a calm heart invited good fortune naturally. Even those who stayed home practiced small rituals, like placing offerings of rice or water near household shrines. These acts were simple but deeply rooted in tradition. As nights fell earlier in winter, evenings became long and quiet. Families slept earlier than usual, conserving energy. Candles and lamps were used sparingly. Darkness was not feared. It was accepted as part of the season. Sleep during these days was believed to be especially important. Resting well was seen as a way to strengthen both body and spirit for the year ahead. Beds were simple, rooms were cool, and blankets were shared. The quiet of winter nights wrapped villages in stillness. These later New Year days did not feel empty or boring to the people of that time. They felt complete. Life moved slowly, but meaningfully. There was comfort in repetition, safety in tradition, and peace in knowing that nothing needed to be rushed. The new year was not just one day, but a long, gentle transition, allowing people to step into the future calmly, without fear or hurry. As the New Year period slowly moved toward its quiet ending, daily life in Japan did not suddenly change or rush back into full speed. Instead, everything returned gently, step by step, in a way that felt natural and calm. Imagine the countryside in late winter, with pale sunlight touching wooden houses and narrow paths. The celebrations had passed, but their feeling still rested in the air. People moved slowly, speaking softly, carrying with them the calm spirit of the new year into their ordinary days. There was no sharp line between celebration and routine. Life flowed smoothly from one into the other. In villages, farmers began to prepare their tools again, checking wooden handles and metal blades that had rested during the holiday days. This work was not hurried. It was done with care, as if each movement still carried respect for the year that had just begun. In many homes, leftover New Year foods were eaten slowly, sometimes warmed again over small fires. These meals were simple but meaningful, reminding families of the days spent together in quiet reflection. The new year was not only a moment in time, but a feeling that gently stretched into the weeks that followed. Children returned to their small daily tasks, helping around the house or learning from elders. Their energy slowly filled the spaces again, but even they seemed calmer during this time. Games were quieter, voices softer. Elders watched them with peaceful smiles, believing that how the year began would shape how it continued. Because of this belief, the calm behavior of these days was considered important. Loud arguments, careless words, or rushed actions were still avoided, even after the main celebrations had ended. In towns, shopkeepers reopened fully, arranging goods neatly and cleaning their spaces carefully. There was a sense of freshness in these actions, as if every broom stroke and every organized shelf helped set the tone for the year ahead. Customers came slowly, greeting one another politely, often exchanging gentle New Year wishes even though several days had already passed. Business was calm, not busy, and no one seemed to mind. This slower rhythm was part of the season. Religious spaces also remained important during this period. Some people returned to shrines and temples for quieter visits, offering small prayers of thanks or asking for guidance for the months ahead. These visits were less formal than those at the very start of the year, but the feeling was still respectful. The sound of footsteps on stone paths, the soft rustle of robes, and the quiet ringing of bells created a peaceful atmosphere that matched the season perfectly. As evenings came, families gathered once again around small fires or lamps. Conversations were gentle and unhurried. People spoke about plans for planting, repairs, travel, or study, but without pressure. These were thoughts shared softly, without firm decisions yet made. The new year was still young, and there was time to let things unfold naturally. Outside, winter winds moved through trees and rooftops, steady and calm, reminding everyone that nature, too, followed its own slow rhythm. As the night deepened, homes grew quiet. Lamps were dimmed, doors secured, and people rested early. The body and mind were allowed to settle, carrying forward the peaceful tone that the new year had brought. Nothing needed to be rushed. Nothing needed to be forced. Life continued just as it always had, guided by seasons, traditions, and quiet understanding. As ordinary life began to return more clearly after the New Year season, the change in Japan 500 years ago was still gentle and controlled, never sudden. Imagine the first truly working mornings of the year arriving quietly. The cold air remained sharp, but there was a slight feeling of movement in the world again. Doors opened a little earlier. Footsteps appeared more often on village paths. The year was no longer only being welcomed, it was beginning to be lived. Even so, people carried the calm of the new year with them, treating these early working days with patience and restraint. Markets began to show small signs of life again. Not crowded or loud, but steady. Merchants laid out goods carefully, arranging baskets of dried foods, cloth, tools, and household items with attention and care. Buyers moved slowly from stall to stall, speaking politely, never rushing. Bargaining was calm and respectful, without raised voices. Many people believed that aggressive behavior in the first market days could bring financial trouble later in the year. Because of this, business was handled gently, with fairness and balance guiding every exchange. Travel between nearby villages slowly resumed. Messengers, traders, and travelers walked along narrow roads, carrying small bundles and letters tied with string. These journeys were quiet. People stopped often to rest, warming their hands and sharing tea when offered. Hospitality remained important. Even after the New Year days ended, kindness toward travelers was believed to bring good fortune. A warm drink, a place to sit, or a short rest by the fire was enough. No one expected payment. Generosity early in the year was thought to return later when most needed. Inside homes, daily schedules became clearer again. People woke earlier, prepared food for the day, and planned tasks with care. But nothing was rushed. The new year had taught patience, and that lesson remained. Women organized household supplies, checking what remained from winter storage. Men prepared tools for longer use. Children returned more fully to learning, practicing writing or listening to instruction from elders. Discipline returned, but gently, without harshness. Sound slowly returned to daily life, but it was still soft. The tapping of tools, the rustle of cloth, the quiet conversations between neighbors. These sounds blended with nature, not overpowering it. Birds, wind, and distant water remained clearly heard. This balance between human activity and natural sound was important. It reminded people that life was shared with the land, not separate from it. Religious thought did not disappear as work returned. Many people continued short daily prayers before beginning tasks, a bow before leaving the house, a moment of stillness before lifting tools. These habits connected work with gratitude. Labor was not just effort. It was participation in the order of life. This belief helped people face difficult days with calm strength, knowing they were part of something larger than themselves. As evenings arrived during this period, fatigue returned in a natural way. After light work and quiet travel, bodies felt ready for rest again. Meals were simple but filling. Families talked a little more now, sharing plans and observations, but still without noise or argument. Laughter returned, soft and brief. The warmth of home felt deeper after a day of effort. Sleep came easily, supported by routine and calm habits. This stage of the new year marked a gentle turning point. Life was moving forward again, but it carried the softness of the season within it. The year was no longer new and fragile, but it was still young. People treated it carefully, guiding it forward with steady hands, calm hearts, and quiet intention. As the New Year days continued to unfold in Japan 500 years ago, life moved into a slower and deeper rhythm, one that felt almost suspended in time. The excitement of the first sunrise and the formal greetings had already passed, but the feeling of renewal had not disappeared. Instead, it settled gently into everyday life. Imagine villages where smoke rose slowly from hearths in the cold morning air, and families woke without urgency. These days were not meant for heavy work or loud activity. They were meant for calm presence, for letting the year begin softly, without force. People believed that how these days were lived would shape the spirit of the months to come, so everything was done with care and patience. Inside homes, daily routines returned, but they felt different from ordinary days. Floors were still clean, decorations still hung quietly, and the atmosphere remained respectful. Meals were simpler now, but still thoughtful. Leftover New Year foods were eaten slowly, with gratitude, not rushed. Each bite was taken as part of a continued ritual of appreciation. Even small actions like pouring tea or sitting near the fire were done with intention. Silence was not uncomfortable. It was welcomed. Conversations stayed gentle, often reflecting on hopes for health, good harvests, and peaceful days ahead. Children who had enjoyed the freedom of the New Year celebrations slowly returned to quieter behavior. They played simple games close to home, their laughter softer than usual, as if they too understood the mood of the season. Elders watched them calmly, offering guidance without strictness. This was a time when teaching happened naturally, through example rather than words. By observing calm adults, children learned how to move gently through the world. This slow passing of values from one generation to another was an important part of the New Year period. Temples and shrines remained active during these days, but the crowds were smaller now. People visited not out of excitement but out of reflection. Imagine walking along a quiet path covered with frost, hearing only footsteps and distant bells. At the shrine, prayers were shorter, more personal. People did not ask for wealth or power. They asked for balance, protection from illness, and harmony within their families. These visits were moments of stillness, where one could pause and feel connected to something larger than daily life. Work outside the home resumed carefully. Farmers inspected their tools and fields without beginning full labor. Craftsmen cleaned their workshops, repaired small items, and prepared materials, but avoided heavy production. The idea was not to rush into effort, but to ease into the year slowly, allowing both body and spirit to adjust. Rest was considered just as important as work during this time. Overworking too soon was believed to bring imbalance and bad fortune later in the year. As evenings arrived, families gathered again around dim light. Oil lamps flickered softly and shadows moved along wooden walls. Stories were told, often repeated ones, passed down for generations. These stories were not meant to entertain loudly, but to comfort and remind listeners of continuity. Life had moved through many New Years before, and it would continue to do so long after. This understanding brought calm. It reduced fear of the unknown and made the future feel manageable. As the night grew deeper, people prepared for sleep earlier than usual. Rest during the New Year period was considered sacred. Bodies that rested well at the start of the year were believed to stay strong throughout it. Mats were laid carefully, bedding adjusted for warmth, and doors secured quietly. Before sleeping, many took a moment to sit in silence, reflecting on the day and offering quiet thanks. There was no rush to fall asleep. Rest came naturally, carried by the slow rhythm of winter and tradition. These later New Year days were not dramatic or festive, but they were deeply meaningful. They showed how Japanese society valued balance, patience, and gentle beginnings. The year did not start with noise or urgency, but with calm continuation. This slow unfolding allowed people to feel grounded, connected, and prepared for whatever the year might bring. As the New Year season moved gently toward its final days, life in Japan 500 years ago entered a slow and thoughtful phase that felt different from both celebration and ordinary routine. The loudness was gone now, and even the quiet excitement had softened into something deeper and steadier. Imagine the villages and towns resting under pale winter skies, the air clean and cold, the ground firm beneath wooden sandals. People woke early, as they always did, but there was less urgency in their movements. The new year was no longer about welcoming spirits or marking fresh beginnings. It had become a time for careful reflection, for steady habits, and for returning to life in a calm and respectful way. Families spent these days quietly organizing their homes after the long period of rest. Decorations made from pine, straw, and paper were slowly taken down, not all at once, but carefully, with respect. These items were not thrown away casually. Many were burned in small community fires or returned to shrines where they were believed to be released back into the spirit world. The act itself was slow and thoughtful. Nothing was rushed. Each movement carried meaning, even if it was done in silence. Children watched their elders closely, learning without being taught, understanding that even the end of a celebration mattered. Food during this time changed again. The special New Year meals had mostly been eaten, and the diet became simpler, lighter, and more practical. Rice, vegetables, and warm soups returned to daily use. These meals were not meant to impress or celebrate. They were meant to steady the body and bring it back into balance after days of rich and symbolic food. People believed that eating simply helped the spirit settle and the body prepare for the long winter ahead. Meals were eaten slowly, often without much conversation, allowing warmth to spread through the body in the quiet morning or evening hours. Work began to return, but not all at once. Farmers checked tools, repaired fences, and planned for future planting, even though the land itself lay dormant. Artisans returned to workshops, opening shutters and letting cold light fall across wooden floors and tools. Merchants began to take stock of goods, counting, organizing, and preparing for trade to resume fully. Yet even as work returned, the pace remained gentle. The New Year's spirit lingered, reminding everyone that haste was not yet welcome. Life moved forward, but softly. Religion and spiritual thought still played a strong role in these days. Many people made final shrine visits not to celebrate, but to offer quiet thanks. These visits were shorter and more personal. A person might stand alone before a shrine, hands together, eyes lowered, saying nothing aloud. The new year was no longer something happening around them. It was something they carried inside. These moments helped people feel settled and ready, as if closing a door slowly rather than slamming it shut. Evenings during this time were especially calm. With celebrations over and work only partially resumed, nights were quiet and long. Families gathered around dim lamps or small hearths. Some repaired clothing. Others told simple stories or sat together without speaking. Outside, the wind moved gently through bare trees and along rooftops. The new year no longer announced itself. It faded gradually, like a final breath before silence. As you imagine these last New Year days passing, notice how peaceful they feel. There is no sharp ending, no sudden return to normal life. Instead, there is a slow blending of celebration into routine, of reflection into action. This gentle transition was an important part of how Japanese people experienced the New Year 500 years ago. It taught patience, balance, and respect for time itself. As the New Year days continued to stretch forward in Japan 500 years ago, the feeling of time itself began to change. The sharp edge of celebration slowly softened into a long, calm season of reflection. People did not rush back into heavy labor or noisy routines. Instead, the days after the main New Year rituals were treated as a gentle bridge between the old year and the full return of ordinary life. Imagine quiet villages where the cold winter light moves slowly across wooden floors and smoke rises lazily from hearths as families sit together in silence, listening to the sound of wind outside. During this period, many households focused on care rather than action. Tools remained unused. Fields rested under winter frost. The new year was believed to set the tone for everything that followed, so people moved carefully, spoke softly, and avoided conflict. Even simple actions were done with intention. Sweeping the floor was slow and mindful. Preparing food was calm and unhurried. The idea was not to force life forward, but to allow it to settle naturally, like snow resting on rooftops. In temples and shrines, the rhythm of prayer continued quietly. Fewer crowds gathered now, but the atmosphere remained sacred. Monks rang bells at regular intervals, their deep sounds moving through cold air and empty courtyards. These sounds were not meant to excite or entertain. They were meant to remind people of time passing, of balance, and of the connection between human life and the natural world. People believed that listening to these sounds helped the heart stay steady for the year ahead. Children during these later New Year days lived in a gentle world of calm freedom. There was little formal work for them to do, and lessons were often paused. They played quietly indoors, folding paper, carving small wooden toys, or listening to elders tell slow stories about ancestors and past winters. These stories were not dramatic. They were steady, repetitive, and familiar, meant to pass wisdom gently rather than impress the listener. In this way, history itself was shared as part of the New Year atmosphere. Food during this time became simpler again, but still carried meaning. Leftover New Year dishes were eaten slowly, sometimes warmed again over small fires. Nothing was wasted, because waste was seen as disrespectful to the effort of the past year. Eating together remained important even if meals were quiet. People believed that sharing food and peace helped strengthen family bonds and ensured harmony in the months to come. As these days passed, people also spent time checking and repairing everyday items. Clothes were folded carefully, mended if needed, and stored neatly. This was not rushed work. It was done with patience, as if each stitch or fold was a promise to live carefully. A well-prepared household was believed to invite stability and good fortune, not through magic, but through order and respect. The natural world played a strong role in how people experienced this time. Winter birds, bare trees, frozen streams, and pale skies were all observed quietly. People paid attention to small signs, such as changes in the wind or the way frost formed in the morning. These observations were not scientific in the modern sense, but they were deeply connected to daily life. Nature was seen as a partner in time, not something to control. As the later New Year days came closer to ending, there was still no sudden return to noise or urgency. Instead, life slowly, almost without notice, began to move forward again. Work resumed one task at a time. Voices became a little stronger. Steps became a little faster. But the calm of the new year lingered in the background, like a quiet memory carried into ordinary days. This long, gentle closing of the New Year season shows how deeply patience and balance were valued in Japan 500 years ago. The New Year was not just a single night or celebration. It was a slow experience that unfolded over many days, shaping how people thought, spoke, worked, and rested. Even as normal life returned, the quiet spirit of the new year remained, reminding everyone to move through the year with care. As the final days of the New Year season slowly arrived in Japan 500 years ago, life did not suddenly change or rush forward. The ending of the new year was gentle, quiet, and respectful, just like its beginning. Imagine the cold air still resting softly over villages and towns. The ground remains firm with winter frost. Smoke continues to rise slowly from hearths as families prepare simple meals. The feeling of the new year does not disappear in one moment. Instead, it slowly fades, like the last light of evening slipping behind the mountains. By this time, households begin to carefully take down their New Year decorations. Pine branches, straw ropes, and sacred ornaments are removed with calm hands. Nothing is thrown away carelessly. Many items are burned in small ceremonial fires, allowing the spirits of the new year to return peacefully. People stand quietly as the smoke rises, believing it carries prayers and gratitude upward. This moment is not sad. It is calm and complete. The new year has done its work. It has cleaned the spirit, brought balance, and renewed the heart. Families slowly return to their normal routines, but they do so with softness. Work does not begin harshly or suddenly. Farmers inspect tools rather than use them fully. Artisans clean their workspaces before starting again. Samurai resume duties with a sense of calm discipline. Everyone understands that the spirit of the new year should linger a little longer, guiding behavior gently into the coming months. Loud voices remain rare. Even movement feels measured and slow. In temples and shrines, the final prayers of the New Year period are offered. Bells are rung quietly. Incense drifts through cold air. Monks chant in steady, low voices that blend with the sound of wind through trees. People bow deeply, thanking the gods and ancestors not for wealth or power, but for stability, health, and survival through another year. These prayers are simple, They are not dramatic. They reflect the deep understanding that life continues best when it moves gently. Children begin to play more freely again, their laughter slowly returning to courtyards and village paths. Yet even their joy feels soft, not wild. Elders watch them with peaceful eyes, believing the new year has placed good balance into young hearts. Mothers return to daily rhythms of cooking, cleaning, and caring, but they do so with a renewed sense of calm. Fathers prepare to travel for work or trade, carrying blessings quietly with them. As the final New Year meals are eaten, food becomes simpler again. The special dishes are finished, but their memory remains. Rice tastes the same, yet it feels different, as if touched by the calm of the season. Eating is slower. Gratitude is still present. Nothing is wasted. Even now, the new year teaches restraint, respect, and awareness. By night, villages settle into silence earlier than usual. Lamps are dim. Doors slide closed. The wind moves softly through bamboo and bare branches. The new year does not end with celebration. It ends with stillness. People lie down, knowing the year ahead will be difficult as all years are, but they feel prepared. Their spirits are aligned. Their homes are clean. Their hearts are steady. Imagine lying there with them, wrapped in simple bedding, listening to the quiet sounds of winter Japan. No rush, no noise. Just the slow breathing of the world continuing. This is how Japanese people ended the new year 500 years ago. Not with excitement, but with balance, not with noise, but with peace, as the night grows deeper, allow this history to rest where it belongs. Let the past remain calm and complete. Let your breathing slow. Let your body grow heavy. The new year has passed gently, and now rest continues in its own quiet way. Good night.